Aloha and welcome back to the Awakening to the Magic of the Menstrual Cycle. I am here with beautiful Kristi Norman this morning. Thank you so much for being here, Kristi. I'm really excited to have you here.
Yeah, thank you. I'm excited to be here, Angel. Very excited.
Yay! Okay, so I'm just going to read a little bit about Kristi to get you guys familiar with her who don't already know her. Kristi has been gifted the titles Menstrual Priestess and Uterus Whisperer, as well as Moon Maven by her loving clients. I love those. She's an intuitive guide and healer who helps people understand and embody the wisdom of the female reproductive system so they can access the power in it to live their best lives. She has held space for nearly 10,000 one-on-one sessions, as well as group classes and workshops. Her signature program, Conscious Menstruation, helps people to embrace the physical and energetic wisdom that is inherent in the menstrual cycle so that they can go from loathing it to loving it. I have to say that is like the pretty much spot on perfect bio for this summit. Like the main reason why I wanted to do this in the first place, because I know there are still so many women who loathe this, and I know that it is actually a gift and one of the most experiences.
Absolutely, yes. And I apologize for my dog. I'm working from home, as most of us are. It's the male person. She'll be gone in a second. But yeah, I know it's so interesting because when I first was coming up with this name for my program and launched it for the first time, my cousin sent me a message and she was like, I have to take your class. I hate my menstrual cycle. And I was like, oh, wow. Whoa. Okay. I had no idea. Like, I've known you all my life. And why haven't we talked about this? So yeah, it's good.
Awesome. Must be the male lady.
Yes, it is.
That's okay. There's actually distraction.
Yes.
So.
Yes, and we just roll with it, we just roll with it. And my dog Miles is lovely, and he should be in here again any minute.
Okay.
If he's not, I'll run over.
That's okay. I get to be authentic and real in these types of things and not worry about being perfect and polished so much. So, What's your dog's name?
Miles.
Miles.
Yes, he's so cute.
Thank you for the real and raw authenticity.
Right, yes. And if you follow me on Instagram, you'll see pictures of Miles. He's so handsome and sweet. Just likes to bark at the mail lady.
What is your Instagram handle while we're on that subject?
Yeah, okay, so it's Kristi Lynn, KristiLynn, and then the underscore, and then Crystalline, Crystallane. And I'm gonna go grab him. I'll be right back. Hey. Come in here. Good boy. Good boy.
Mr. Mouse. Well, okay. What an exciting introduction into it.
I know. Okay, here we are.
Okay, beautiful. Welcome back into the space. So, Conscious Menstruation, and how long have you been running that for?
So, my first round of Conscious Menstruation was in 2018, and the class itself actually went by a different name, and then I kind of reworded and reworked the course. So it's been a couple years that I've been running it, and it's a video-based course now, so people can take in the information on their own time, and then we meet right now via Facebook Live and Zoom as well. So it's a really beautiful container because people, like I said, can do the work and take in the information when it's convenient for them. And then we have this beautiful space, supported space through a private Facebook group.
Beautiful. So you have a community that you're cultivating also for this.
Yes, absolutely.
Community is so important when it comes to, well, everything really, but especially like the healing and personal development journey. I think it's really important to have some community support. So I'm so glad you're doing that.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, just one second. Okay. So awesome. Your Facebook group and your conscious menstruation. That is so wonderful. I'm so grateful that you put that together. I wanted to ask you to share a little bit about your journey and what brought you to this work.
Sure, absolutely. So, like most personal and professional healing journeys, I feel like mine has all kinds of bits and pieces of anecdotes that have kind of led me to the work that I'm doing right now. And so I'll just share what I guess comes through intuitively today, because there's just so much. It's so many years of experience that has brought me here. And so, what I will say is that I first found that I loved teaching about the menstrual cycle and sex education when I was an elementary school teacher. I taught for 6 years, and during that time I taught first grade sex ed and I taught fourth grade sex ed. And it really woke something in me. I had always been super comfortable talking about the menstrual cycle and talking about sex with my friends and my partners and things like that. But when I had the chance to do that with children, it was like something really came alive in me. And, so I taught from the book, but then I gave them a chance to ask questions. And their questions were so beautiful and so innocent. And because I already knew that I loved teaching, I was like, oh my goodness, I love teaching about this stuff. And long story short, during my elementary education career as a teacher, I went back to school for massage therapy, which was always something that I would say was like my first passion, but I did 4-year college instead. And as I was going through my massage training and then starting my own business, I realized that I again was called to bridge body work and energy work with knowledge of the menstrual cycle, assisting births by being a doula, doing placenta encapsulation, and then eventually offering classes. And during that time that I was a massage therapist, I've been a massage therapist for almost 15 years, I started having my own menstrual cycle challenges. And I was having some pain. I didn't know what was going on. And I found the Arvigo techniques of Maya abdominal therapy through a really good friend of mine who happened to be my business partner at the time. And I took the trainings, and I took the trainings for me first, which as healers, we know that's like so unusual, because as soon as you learn something, you're automatically thinking like, oh, I know this person and this person and this person who would benefit from the work. But I decided to do it for me first and really integrate the healing in my own body, and then felt the call to continue my training and do hands-on healing body work with a fertility, reproductive, menstrual cycle focus. Yeah, so that's where I'm at now.
Beautiful. That sounds like a wonderful culmination of a lot of education and experience that you have been collecting along your journey.
Yes.
So, was that, did you say abdominal massage? Is that what you got trained in?
Yeah. Yep, exactly. So the full long name is the Arvigo techniques of Maya abdominal therapy. So Dr. Rosita Arvigo studied with Mayan shaman Donna Ligia Ponte in Belize for many years and made a promise to him that she would share everything that he taught her. And so what she has done is she has, I could say, like, blended ancient tradition with modern anatomy and physiology understanding of the body to create this gorgeous system of abdominal massage that helps heal digestive and reproductive issues, challenges.
That is so beautiful. Have you read Tammy Kenn's Wild Feminine?
Yes. Yes, I have all of her books. So
is that
amazing.
What's in that book?
What's that?
Is that what's in that book?
No, Tammy's work is different because she has physical therapy background. She's a physical therapist, and she does internal pelvic floor work. And Maya abdominal therapy is all external, right on your belly.
Interesting. I keep hearing this. I actually don't even think I ever heard of the Maya abdominal massage until I started building the summit, and it's come up in so many interviews and conversations, and it's always the same technique that originated from the Maya. It's really interesting that I've only seen it come from that tradition and have not really seen the abdominal massage from any other culture. Seems to be the most common one, if not the only.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. And I think like in Thai massage, there is some focus on the abdomen, and in some other forms of different kinds of bodywork therapies. But to my knowledge, same is true. It really does seem that it's a very South and Central American modality and tradition. And I think part of that is perhaps because it was, I don't know if it still is, but it was so much ingrained into like their daily life and their daily rituals. It was just something that you did. You know, you kept your uterus in place for the health of your whole body. Yeah.
That's amazing. I'm still new to that concept that the uterus actually like comes out of place, even though I know I've I don't remember, but I've learned about like sometimes in the past in our culture here in America, when I think women have been like deeply misunderstood in their health, and when pretty much mostly male doctors were trying to diagnose them, and like hysteria was a regular diagnosis. And I remember there being something about like a wandering uterus, and I always was just like, what the hell? Wander around?
Right. Right. Yeah. So like if you had migraines, then that meant your uterus was like up in your head. It wandered around to give you trouble, to make trouble. Yeah, I know. I know, so weird. But yeah, like the uterus floats in its position naturally. It is supposed to do that. So like around ovulation time, the uterus will move up and away from the vaginal opening to create more space for sex. And then when we're closer to bleeding, it will kind of drop down a little bit. And there's this healthy variation and movement that happens with the uterus. But sometimes because of injury or trauma, the uterus can move to a position and kind of get stuck there. And that's really what we're addressing with the body work, is a gentle massage to encourage the uterus to come back into position. Because, you know, it makes sense when we think about like any organ of the body that's like twisted or scrunched or like not quite in the right position is going to eventually cause some kind of issues in the system. And the same is true for the uterus. And so, you know, they'll say like somewhere between 80 and 90% of people who have a uterus have one that is misplaced or displaced. And it's become in the medical field just a variation of normal. And for some people, it can be normal. They can achieve pregnancy and not have an issue. They can, have a really regular menstrual cycle and have a really pleasant menstrual cycle and not have an issue. But there are also a lot of people who have a uterus out of place that do have trouble because of it.
Yeah, that really makes me think about some of the differences in the way that like more holistic perspectives view the body as opposed to allopathic medicine. Like modern Western medicine has a tendency to like segment the body into sections, and usually a more holistic approach looks at it as a whole system, and how one thing or one imbalance or something being out of alignment affects the entire body. So that really makes me wonder how many ailments that are seemingly unrelated to the womb really have to do with something like the womb being out of place. I actually have been thinking my own in my own experience. Like I used to go to a chiropractor regularly, and most of the time she always adjusted one of my hips, and like one of my legs always seemed a little bit longer than the other, and it would always go back out of alignment no matter how many times she adjusted it. And I'm really wondering if that's what it is my womb needing to be adjusted.
Yeah, it absolutely could be. And, I totally agree with everything that you're saying. When we think about the body in holistic terms, it makes sense that if something is out of balance or out of place, it's going to affect other areas of the body. And Donna Lihiopante, the Mayan shaman, who, I consider a mentor, even though I never met him, he passed before my training, says that the uterus is the center of the body, which makes sense when we think about like the Dantian in Tai Chi or Qigong, even just like the geographical center of the body, our center of balance. The uterus is right there. The womb space is right there if you don't have a uterus. And he says, if it is out of place, then everything in your life potentially will be out of balance, because this is your place of power. We can think of it as the sacral chakra too. This is your place of creativity. This is your place of power. And if there is an imbalance there, it is going to affect everything else. It's going to affect how you express yourself. It's going to affect how you, the choices that you make, and even if the womb isn't, the uterus isn't technically out of place, but you have a certain feeling about your menstrual cycle, you loathe it, for example, that is going to affect everything else that you choose to do in your life.
Definitely.
Yeah.
I'm so glad we're talking about this and getting this out to more women.
Yeah. One other thing I wanted to say too, in terms of that holistic view of the body, this is such an interesting story, because at the time that I was having trouble with my uterus, I actually the pain and the issue wasn't coming from my uterus. Like I was definitely having more painful periods, but the issue that I was having was actually in my right foot. On the inside of my heel. And for anybody who knows reflexology, or like the reflex points of the body, the inner part of your heel is the uterus. That's the reflex point for the uterus. And that is exactly what hurt all the time. And I was doing a lot of running at the time. And so I was going to physical therapists, I was getting massage, seeing my chiropractor, trying to figure out like what is going on. And then my friend said, well, like maybe your uterus is out of place. And that is causing some issue going down your leg, because we knew it was the uterus reflex point. And sure enough, when I went to my first training, and my the instructor in the training was palpating around on my lower abdomen, she said, your uterus is tilted to the right and leaning forward. And that is going to affect that whole right side of the body, the leg. When we think about like blood stagnation or energy not being able to move freely through an area, that's exactly what was happening. And as we moved my uterus into place, and then I started doing my self-care massage, eventually that heel pain went away.
Yay!
Yeah.
Oh, I love it when we support the body in doing what it naturally does, which is just like create miracles every day and continuously bring itself back into alignment, heal itself. It's really incredible when you start developing a deeper connection with your body and working with it to support it. Amazing, miraculous healing that you can experience that I personally feel like a lot of Western doctors would deem incurable. I love accounts of people healing things that the doctor said weren't healable. It's pretty amazing. I just wanted to share I wanted to share a little bit about my own experience in the way that the whole system works, kind of like what you just said, but mine isn't related to my womb. It's good to hear these types of things because it really makes you think differently about your body. For instance, several years ago, when I was still deeply struggling with emotional eating, I gorged myself on something, I can't even remember what it was, and went to sleep. And when I woke up, my neck was so messed up. And I didn't realize that it was a direct link to the emotional eating until I went to the chiropractor, and I learned that basically I put strain on my gut, which put strain on like my low back and those muscles down there, and shot up and messed up my neck of like all things. You wouldn't think that your neck would be messed up you eating a chocolate cake or something, you know?
Right. Yeah, totally. I've had the exact same thing happen. So that's why I'm laughing. I'm not laughing, at you. I'm laughing with you because and the fact that you just said cake too, like that was the first time that I made that correlation. I had a piece of birthday cake after not having sugar for a really long time.
Wow.
And the next morning I woke up and it was like all up in my neck. Exactly. Yeah. I know.
Well, and especially when your body, like if you get your body used to not having something for a while, like sugar, for instance, it can go through a little bit of shock when you reintroduce something into it. It never ceases to amaze me watching the way that the body adapts to like everything, which is why humans can survive for so long with unhealthy habits, because there's like this mechanism of the body that like compensates for the misalignment and makes it so you can continue to function even though you're not necessarily functioning at your optimum. But the way that the body does that, like compensating for what's out of alignment to keep us going, is incredible. And I think it's a testament to just like the resilience of the human being, and it's one of our greatest gifts. And I also feel like it's been a downfall for us because we can endure so much that isn't good for us and just keep going. It's really interesting how that could be a blessing and a curse. And I'm just so fascinated with this physical form all of the time, the more and more you start working with it. So I wanted to just rewind a little bit and go back to the abdominal massage. So I was just kind of like wondering, I'm sure it's like a million things that could cause a uterus to come out of alignment. I'm pretty sure eating could probably do that too. Like an extended period of time having inflammation in your gut and injuries, surgeries. I actually find it fascinating to learn that even like oftentimes when babies are born, they benefit from having some type of like baby chiropractic adjustment because of what happens to their body when they're like moving through the birth canal.
Yeah.
Also makes me wonder like what misalignments we carry throughout our life that we got just from the birthing process.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know, like if birth is allowed to go in its sort of like physiological pattern, I don't want to say natural because there's lots of different ways that we birth, but when we think about a baby moving through the birth canal, if conditions are set up well for that process to happen, then the baby does get an adjustment going through the birth canal, like a chiropractic adjustment. But not all babies get that because maybe the birth was super fast, or maybe there was a cesarean that had to happen. And so, you know, some babies don't get that. If you think of it like when babies are in the womb, they're all like scrunched up, and then when they move through the birth canal, it's like a lengthening. The head lengthens, the neck lengthens, the spine lengthens, and that's like an adjustment that happens as they move. But again, that doesn't always happen. And so, yeah, babies totally benefit from chiropractic care, from abdominal massage. It's not the same as my abdominal therapy, but there's a great little massage you can do with babies to help them digest and get rid of gas, and soothe. But yeah, the other thing I wanted to say is, you know, you were mentioning like, why does the uterus move out of place? And you're right, there are so many different reasons. But on the topic of pregnancy, we have 12 ligaments that sort of wrap around the uterus, the ovaries, and just hold the entire system. And a couple of those ligaments, they go from like 3 inches in a non-pregnant body to like 18 inches in full-term pregnancy. And after somebody gives birth, those ligaments have to heal and kind of squish back down into their, well, we could say their pre-pregnant state, but we don't know for sure if it goes all the way back to like, you know, 3 inches-ish. And so when we think about the uterus healing and going back to a pre-pregnant size, and those ligaments going back to a pre-pregnant size, and then we think about how a parent, a birthing parent, holds a baby on their hip all the time. And there's usually, like, if you've ever held a baby, like, you know, there's like one hip where it's comfortable, and the other hip, it's like the baby's sliding off all the time. And so, like, for me, it was always my left side. I was always holding my babies on my left side, which is hiking my hip on that side. And if my ligaments haven't healed, then, and my uterus is heavy, then it stands to reason that it's going to always be sort of like leaning or kind of pushed over to one side. And so, you know, so that's one example, is just like those habitual patterns that we find ourselves in, those postures we find ourselves in every day. A lot of times we sit on the couch the same way to watch a movie. We sleep on the same side of the bed. We hold kids. We sit with our legs crossed funky when we're on the computer. You know, those kinds of things can shift or change a uterus. And then we have traumas, you know, somebody has a fall to their tailbone, or an issue with their sacrum, or like you mentioned, your hip being out of alignment, right? All of those kinds of things. Yeah.
That's so interesting. Thank you for sharing that. Not some things that I would necessarily think about, but I have not been through the initiation into motherhood yet. So that kind of gets me curious about the abdominal massage and how that works for a woman who has given birth. Is there like some different types of techniques to help the womb settle back in, or do you kind of just like leave the body alone?
Yeah, it depends on the person, but usually we wait until about 6 weeks postpartum, or once postpartum bleeding has stopped. And then the work is essentially the same as it is in someone who's not pregnant. So the massage itself is the same, but there are more considerations to take into account because the uterus is bigger, and there may be some muscle separation in the abdomen, that kind of thing. But the idea is supporting the system so that it can heal, and so that hormones can regulate, and all of those kinds of things.
So the body can do its thing.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, supporting the body.
Wow, that is just really incredible to think about, the enormous amount of change that takes place in a body once conception has happened. Just just like the ligaments that stretch, the womb that stretches, just like thinking about how the hips open, like how do they not, like, it's just so like perfectly designed for all of this to work. And it's just no wonder it's so life-changing, because it is
Absolutely
such a massive miracle to experience or witness if you're the man, to just I'm still in awe over it.
Yeah, completely. I know. Me too. And like you said, like every time you learn something new about the body or the way something works, it's like this continued state of awe, right? And wonder. Like, oh wow, we're miracles.
Totally. And I think that all human bodies are miraculous, but there's just like something extra special about the female body and that whole process of creating new life and the way that it emerges into the world. It's just incredible, down to the like precision of the hormones, and just incredible. It kind of like makes me think about space and the planets, the way that like the moon is perfectly, as like at one point as far away from the earth as it needs to be to like help the tides of our oceans move, but not too far away. And like the sun, it's not too close to fry us, and it's not, you know what I mean? Like everything is just so perfectly designed.
Yes,
For human
completely.
I wanted to just also comment on what you were talking about earlier about teaching. Did you teach sex education and about the menstrual cycle to children?
I did. Yeah, so I taught at a Catholic school. So the curriculum was, well, if any of you are Catholic, you probably remember. The curriculum was, it was actually pretty good. I was really happy to see that I was able to talk about correct anatomical terms and that kind of thing. But with the first grade curriculum, I didn't talk about the menstrual cycle, but with the fourth graders, I did. And I was continually just sort of shocked by the lack of information that I was able to give them. So I supplemented a bit because the information wasn't wrong. It was just that there was a whole lot that was left out. Yeah. Yeah. And at the time, I really didn't know the energetics. This was like 20 years ago. I didn't know myself the energetics of the menstrual cycle, and how our moods can shift and change, and how our preferences in each season or week of the cycle can shift and change, and how none of that is wrong. It's all right. But I didn't have that information at that time. So it was very much just, like, ovulation happens here, bleeding happens here.
Yeah. I didn't have any of that information either, and I've been learning so much through interviewing speakers for this summit, and the more I talk about it and learn from you speakers, the more I'm like developing an even deeper connection with my own body and observing the shifts in my own hormones. And I just find it really interesting once you really come to terms with the fact that you're not your mind, and you can like observe it, especially when you start learning about the menstrual cycle and the shifting that takes place throughout it. I just recently have been really fascinated to watch the way that the atmosphere of my thoughts has been changing, and how there's like naturally a time during your cycle where it's like it's natural to feel more insecure and unsure. Like, for instance, I'm coming into like pre-menstruation right now. So I'm like watching myself energetically shift and like feel more sensitive and like more self-conscious and like unsure about things that a week ago I was like so sure and empowered about. And it's just really interesting to watch the shifting and to know that it's part of a cycle, and to not like get wrapped up in all of it and allow your thoughts to torment you and make you really question yourself or what you're doing in life. To just know that it's part of the natural cycle that's so empowering all on its own. And I've really been appreciating it.
Yeah, and I think especially in that premenstrual phase, because for most of us, that is the most challenging phase of the cycle. And every single phase of the cycle has its own deep wisdom. And that phase, I think, when you really can be with it, just be with it, has so much wisdom to offer, and really ushers you into the transformation that becomes the ongoing cycle, so that you can start fresh when you start bleeding. And so it's that, like, the PMS time, right? And I don't adhere to that stage of your cycle is not a syndrome at all. But everybody knows it as PMS, right? But it's that phase of your cycle that I think when most people start working with their cycle, they notice shifts in that phase more than any other. They can see the nuance, and they start to say like, oh, this stuff that's happening that I can't stand, or that, I feel it and I feel like I'm crazy, or I feel like something's wrong with me. They start to realize like, oh, nothing is wrong. This is all right. And I can learn from this, and I can be with it, and I can parse out like, the low self-esteem thoughts are normal, but they're not meant to be acted on. They're meant to be looked at and then let go, right? Yeah, so there's so much juicy wisdom in that phase of the cycle. It's actually my favorite phase to to talk about and to help people work through, because it's like everybody gets it. As soon as I start saying like sex doesn't feel good and in that phase of your cycle, or like maybe it feels good but like what you liked a week ago you can't stand now, and you can like feel yourself getting irritated with everyone, but like they were doing the same thing 2 weeks ago and it was fine and now I can't stand it. And you just throw out some of those examples to people and all of a sudden they're like, oh my gosh, you mean like I'm normal? This is normal? Like,
totally.
It is. It is. It's normal and it's necessary. It's essential.
Yeah. And from what I understand, from what I've read and learned from talking with other women about this, this is the premenstrual phase, which is what a lot of women refer to as like the fall or autumn cycle. I know it's a little bit different in different books, but that's the one that I've been learning from. And so this phase is where you meet your inner critic more, and where you're much more like put on notice to like what's really working in your life, what feels in alignment for you, and perhaps maybe like where you've not been being as true to yourself and not having as good of boundaries the month before. That's usually where it surfaces, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, and then there's the challenge to kind of parse out like what of this wisdom is real, and what of this wisdom is coming with me into the next cycle. And then also like there's a huge challenge, especially like, for example, let's say that something comes up in that premenstrual phase that has to do with your partner. And it's like, oh, there was this, we had this discussion and I still don't feel right about how it ended. And I have things to say to my partner. When that stuff comes up in the premenstrual phase, that is not the time to talk about it. It's the time to take notice and to take note and to journal and to be upset about it. But you hold that wisdom and then you talk about it in another phase of the cycle when you aren't going to yell about it, when you're not going to like cry the whole time, and you're going to be more clear. You're going to find your words in a better way. So there's like all this wisdom of like, the cycle will continue and I can learn these things right now, but it doesn't mean I act on them right now. So I always tell people like with that phase of the cycle, like if you do have to vent about something or communicate about something, vent correctly. Like choose what you are going to talk about at that time, because it's not always best to have those conversations when you can't find words well, or you feel so emotionally connected to it.
Yes. When you're like in the storm of emotions, it can be very hard to see clearly. And it's definitely best to be able to like sit with the storm and have it calm a little bit before you interact with someone. But that's where it is the most challenging, is when you're triggered and it feels like you just need to voice your truth and get it out. But it's really incredible when you get to a point where you can actually sit with it. I just recently, like a week ago, experienced this where I felt so triggered and it was enormous, and I was so furious and sad and so emotional and like overwhelmed, and it did involve someone else. And I also knew that it didn't need to be World War III, and I just retreated for a couple of days and I sat with it and I just kind of prayed and I journaled about it and I asked my higher self, and I just sat with it and trusted that whatever was going to need to be said would be said in the best way possible. And I basically kind of like let go and asked my higher self to direct me. And I asked her I asked her to talk because I didn't know the best way to go about it. It was a situation I'd never been in before. And I think that's where it becomes most challenging for us, is when we start entering territory that is unknown for us. We don't really have any previous experience to call on as to the best way to handle something. And that's exactly where the growth is, you know. That's exactly where the opportunities are to grow and to be able to detach a little bit and kind of like take a step back and be responsible for your emotions. It's like a total game changer. And I think that has potential to really shift and heal relationships when women have the ability to give themselves space. Because I know a lot of women like don't necessarily have the luxury of just retreating because they have kids and like a bunch of other things to do, and that makes it way more challenging when you have this really loud energy inside of you screaming at you to retreat and go inside, and you can't necessarily. And I think that's what like perpetuates trauma and suffering, is just collectively women not really having the support that they need to honor this really significant, huge process that's taking place inside of them.
Yeah. Yes, I agree. I completely agree. And I, I do have that privilege because I create my own schedule with being self-employed, that I know that I have to make a lighter schedule for myself in my premenstrual time and like for the first like 1 or 2 days of my period. And I have the ability to do that, thankfully. And I know that there are a lot of people who can't do that. And you're right, like young kids, work, all of our obligations and the things that we choose to do in our lives. And I think if there's any wisdom in just knowing the cycle, it's like knowing that the premenstrual phase is coming and starting to practice taking some things off your plate. So like practicing that sacred no by saying, oh, you want me to do this and this that week? I can't that week. And so you can't take your kids off of that plate of busyness, but you can take other obligations off of your plate at that time. And maybe you do have a work situation where you can take a day off and give yourself that space. But if you can't, then you show up and you do your work, but then you like leave your evening clear, like getting really creative about finding and navigating that space.
Definitely. Yeah, that's something that I have been speaking about also, that it really is requiring women to get creative and work their own life puzzle, because everybody's situation is unique. And just having more awareness about your cycle in general, so that you know that there's shifting coming in the future. Just that alone, just having more awareness about it, I think is going to play a huge part for a lot of women, and already has played a huge part for women who've been kind of working on this journey so far. I have been actually practicing syncing my schedule with my cycle more over the last couple of months. It's really interesting, actually. I was just talking to someone just over the last few days about how strange it's been since my last bleed. up until this next one, because this is the first time that I actually synced my schedule with my cycle and have been like really aware of it and have been preparing for it and supporting myself in it. And it's done this really bizarre thing with my perception of time. Like that cycle to this one, really like honoring the cyclical nature of it and giving myself the space to like totally rest when I'm bleeding. It has made this last month feel like 4 times longer. like
totally.
Much more energy and bandwidth for everything. It just has been kind of like it's been really strange for my mind. Like my mind can't even comprehend why it feels like 4 times longer than it normally is. And that also really makes me think about the way that like we've been unnaturally stuck in this momentum of like forward moving where nobody's honoring the cyclical patterns of nature, and it's just like this constant production and go go go, and how that produces this mentality like you never have enough time, there's always too much to do, and it makes your life just like seem really short and fast. And just like this last month of really experiencing really tuning my life to honoring the cyclical side of nature has shifted that perception of time to be a lot less linear and much more expansive. And that has just been a really interesting experience for me. Have you experienced anything like that in your own life?
Yeah, I have. Because I very much feel for a lot of the years of my life that time wasn't on my side, and that I was constantly like racing the clock, right? And absolutely stepping out of that, what I call like the 24-hour solar cycle, like the productivity, go, 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 very masculine way that our culture is attuned right now, and being attuning myself to the lunar cycle and to my lunar cycle, and to the natural moon cycle, and allowing myself to step outside of that productivity wheel has completely made me feel like I create time and I work with time and time nurtures me, versus there's never enough time and I don't have enough energy and I'm not going to ever get all of these things done. Yeah, that's completely.
And another one of the pieces of the magic of the menstrual cycle, it's like you don't even know the dimension that you unlock when you start on this journey of paying attention to it and working with it. It's just incredible. I'm so excited for women to be stepping on the path of consciously working with their cycles and just thinking about the amazing benefits and transformation that this has for every woman. It's really exciting.
It is. It's so exciting. Completely. And to have more of these conversations and more spaces, and to have it be really normal to like, get with a friend and be like, okay, well, what cycle day are you on today? And hearing their experience of life currently, and then, saying to them like, okay, well, I'm on this cycle day and like, this is my experience. And then being held in that larger sphere of, there are many of us bleeding right now, and there are many of us ovulating right now, and there are many of us on the other poles. And that, kind of gives me comfort in thinking about being able to step away during premenstrual time and bleeding time, because I know that that there are many other people who are out there doing all of the work, and I can take a break, and then I can come back in, and I can show up, and I can do my work while other people are resting. Yeah, it's beautiful.
Definitely. just to like think about the way that a tribe would function when the women are fully in tune with their cycles, and would like the ovulating woman would naturally lend some of their energy to help support menstruating women so that they really do have and support.
Sorry, guys.
That's okay.
This is life. This is quarantine life. I don't know what's happening. What's that?
I said something must be happening.
Oh, yes.
I think she was like announcing the beginning, and intuitively she's announcing the ending of the session.
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
Beautiful. Wow, I have really, really enjoyed sharing this space with you and talking about these things. It just feels really good to be having conversations about this and sharing it with other women so that it can help empower others. So I just want to say thank you so much for taking the time out to share your beautiful self and energy with me and all of the women who tune into this.
Yeah, and thank you so much. And thanks for holding this space and creating this summit. It's just like such a beautiful thing to be a part of.
Definitely. I'm just ending the call.
Right.
I'm just the channel. I'm not even like creating it necessarily. It's just flowing and I'm part of it. So
yep, love it.
Okay, so before we get off, I just want you to go over a little bit about services that you offer right now.
Okay, yeah. So, well, in quarantine life, I'm not working in person right now. In my state, massage therapy has been shut down. But one thing I will say, you know, wherever you are tuning in, there is, if you're like feeling Arvigo therapy, just go to arvigotherapy.com and you can find practitioners in any area. So, you know, the things that I'm offering right now are all virtual, and I do have a free course online, and Angel has the link, and then I will be offering conscious menstruation again very, very soon, so you can look for that at the same link. I do post a lot of juicy menstrual wisdom on Instagram, and then that goes to my Facebook page as well. And I also offer new moon and full moon virtual circles right now that are astrology based. So less about menstruation, except the lunar cycle is shifting and changing. It is the same as the one in our bodies. And so I do host circles there as well.
Beautiful. Okay, so I just want to clarify. I have a link, and that is to a free, is that a talk? A course?
Yeah, so it's a free virtual red tent, and it is about, that particular one is honoring your flow. So it's about what menstruation wants. And it's a pre-recorded class that I did. So there are some people, you know, that were actually on the class. And that one where I talk about the 4 R's of what menstruation wants, and that's free. And it's a little over an hour. And then on that same page is the conscious menstruation course link as well.
Beautiful. Thank you so much for offering that to the audience here. And you're going to be running a new session of the conscious menstruation.
Yes. Right? Yep. Exactly. Yeah. The next round will probably start the beginning of July. Yeah.
Beautiful. Okay. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for offering those. Sharing those for any women who want to take part in that. And I will make sure to share your contact information for anybody who just loved you and wants to get a hold of you.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Kristi. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in. And I will see you for another episode. Have a beautiful rest of your day.
Oh, thank you.
Aloha.